Hello, my name is Scott Vandehei and I'm a front-end developer at Cloud4. Today, I'd like to talk to you about how to publish an updated version of an NPM package. Now, recently I've been trying to do more open source work, especially in the form of maintaining Cloud4's NPM packages. However, as someone relatively new to the operations side of things, I've found myself getting lost about how exactly to release a new version of a package. Now, part of the problem is that these projects were created over many years with multiple developers involved, and because standards and best practices evolve quickly, each project's release process was set up differently. Some used a release helper like npm pub, others had pre-published scripts, others had nothing special at all. Now, none of this is bad, and I am not trying to shame any other devs, but it did increase friction. Releasing a new version of any package was just a little harder than it needed to be, since I had to figure out what unique process to use for each. So I recently spent some time reading the NPM docs and familiarizing myself with some of the most common release helper tools, and I wanted to get a better handle on what's typically involved in the NPM release process. So in this video, I'll cover the most common release steps, how to determine the release process for an existing project, and recommendations to project maintainers. Now, let's start with the standard release process. Here's my understanding of the steps that are most commonly expected to be run when publishing a new version of an NPM package. First, you're going to do your safety checks. You're going to get pull to make sure that you're on main and you've got the latest code. You're going to run git status to check that there are no uncommitted changes lingering around in your local workspace. You're going to run nvm use if the project specifies version of npm. And you're going to run npm ci to do a clean install of all of your dependencies. And then you're going to run npm test or run any linters or anything else like that you need to ensure that your code is shippable. In some projects, this might be handled in a pre-version or pre-publish only script. Now, finally, you'll run npm run build to get the latest code to deploy. And you'll see that this project, in fact, doesn't have a build step, but I think most npm packages do have a build step, and it'll probably be handled in pre-publish only, but you might need to do it by hand. Up next, you're going to update the changelog. I think it's really important that every project has a changelog. You can see here that I've got some unreleased changes on this project, so I'm going to tag the next release and give it today's date and save this. And then I'm going to jump back over to the command line and I'm going to quickly make a commit with the updated version of the changelog. Now, this next step is really important. In order to tell NPM that you have a new version, you have to tell it that you have a new version number. And there's a couple ways to do this. You could do it all by hand. You could go into your package.json and package lock JSON file and manually update the version number and then commit it and add a new tag. Or you could run the built-in npm command for this, which is npm version. In this case, I've got breaking changes, so I'm going to release a major version, npm version major. And you can see there it's tagged my next version as v10. That's great. Now we're going to publish to npm. So you just type npm publish. It will probably ask you to do two-factor auth by opening your browser and ask you to sign in there. No problem, we'll do that. And then once we're done authenticating, we end up back at the command line. And hey, look at that. Our new version has been released. There's a little bit of tidying up we need to do. We published to npm, but now we need to publish our changes to Git. So we're going to do git push and git push -- tags to push our new tag and our latest changes up to GitHub. And finally, we're going to create a GitHub release. Now, this step is optional, and you'll actually see me flailing around here for a second as I see version 7 as the most recent release, because I forgot that on this particular project, we have opted to maintain a changelog rather than do Git releases. But anyway, it's an easy process. Once you have a tag, you come to draft a new release. You select the tag that you want to be this release. You give it a title, which is usually just the name of the tag. And then I like to copy in the changelog notes for the release notes. and then you publish it, and that's it. Now anybody who comes to your repo will be able to see a new release over there. Also, if we go to NPM, we can see that our new version has been published there. It does sometimes take a little bit for the badge on your local page to update, but we know that it's there on NPM, and we've got a new version released for GitHub. So that's our kind of standard release process. Not too bad. Now, you might be thinking, Scott, that seems like a lot of work, man. And yeah, you're not wrong. Judging by the many tools designed to help with releases, a lot of devs feel the same way. Some of the most popular tools that'll handle all of this for you include Semantic Release, Releasit, NP, NPM Pub, and Bump. Each tool addresses some of the pain points in the release process. I made up a spreadsheet comparing the features on each. You should evaluate helper tools carefully before deciding to add any to your process. And be aware that while a tool may automate some of the process, you will still need to add clear documentation explaining how to use it, ideally in a contributing guide. More on that in a moment. There's no clear industry standard. And many projects don't have documented release procedures, and this can make figuring out how to publish a new version tricky in a project that you're not familiar with. Which brings us to our next topic, determining how to release an existing project. Now that we have a good understanding of the typical release steps, let's talk about how to evaluate an existing project to determine what release process it uses. First, check the README and the contributing files. You'll likely not find the release process here because the README file is intended for users, not contributors, but there may be a link to a contributing guide. If there isn't, check for a contributing.md file in the root of the project. Most projects keep this there, but they might move it into a docs folder or even the .github folder. If you can't find a contributing guide, or if it doesn't document the release process, then it's time for step 2. Ask other project members. Someone has been handling releases before you got here. See if you can get in touch with the team. Ask if anybody knows about the release process. If you're not sure who to ask, look at the commit history. See whose name is on the last commit that bumped the version number. If no one knows, or if you can't get in touch with the previous releasers, then it's time for a little detective work. We're going to open up package.json, and we're going to look at the scripts. You might see if any of the scripts in there seem relevant. Sometimes you might find a release script or a publish script that runs a release helper tool. If so, try using this for releasing. Or you might find some of the NPM publishing lifecycle scripts like pre-version, post-version, pre-publish only, or post-publish. These will all automatically run when you run the npm version command or the npm publish command. If so, that's a good indication that you'll use the standard process that I outlined before, and including the npm version and npm publish commands. And finally, if all else fails and you can't find any documentation or any indication that anybody releases this process in any way at all, just follow the release process I described above. It'll work. It's just, a little manual. If you can't find any documentation, just follow the standards, Once you manage to get a successful release, it's time to start thinking about the future. You're a maintainer now. How can you improve the process for this project for future devs who want to release? Here are some things you can do. First of all, document your release process in a contributing guide. I just told the contributors, go look for that contributing guide. Now it's your turn to set one up if it doesn't exist. It's a great idea to add this so new contributors can learn anything they need to know about how to work with this project, which includes the release process. GitHub has a great introduction to adding a contributing guide. I'll link it in the show notes. Typically, this contributing guide lives in a contributing all caps .md file in the root folder, which makes it easy to find. If you put it anywhere other than the root folder, you should probably add a link in the README as well so people can find it. And finally, document your release helper tools. Release helpers are great. But don't assume that every contributor is going to be familiar with them. As I mentioned, there's a ton of them out there, and they all work a little differently. At the very least, add a link to the tools documentation from your contributing guide. Even better, explain exactly what steps you expect contributors to follow when using the tool. Don't underestimate the power of a checklist. If you're using a release tool that automates the process of updating the change log, the contributing guide should explain what the results look like and what a contributor using the release tool should expect. Finally, please choose your release helper tools carefully. In general, there's going to be a trade-off between a tool that abstracts some of the work away from contributors and the extra overhead of those contributors having to learn how to use it. If your team has more inexperienced contributors, a multi-step release process could intimidate them or cause them to hesitate to release a new version. In this case, a helper tool might help make things easier by reducing the number of steps they need to follow and ensure they don't skip a step by mistake. On the other hand, if your team is mostly experienced open source contributors, a release tool holding their hand might seem more annoying than helpful. In that case, limiting your helpers to a simple pre-version or pre-publish only script might make things easier by hewing closer to the standard release process. As always, in the end, the best release process is the one that suits your team. Thanks for watching.